Hello, welcome to this week's Maker Meeting from Workshop 88. Each week, we explore projects that our members are working on and topics of interest to our Patreon supporters. Our Makerspace workshop primarily serves the western suburbs of Chicago. These meetings are about the opportunity to interact with the community of makers. We learn by sharing and asking questions. If you see the value or have something to add, then you should become a member no matter where you live. Membership includes access to our Slack channels or for even more discussions on a variety of topics. Tonight, we're going to start with Peter and what he has to share. Take it away, Peter.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, this was just kind of a project that I've been working on just for the last day or so. In some ways it's not all that exciting, but I think it has some interesting aspects. And so I thought I would talk about it for just a few minutes. So the itch that I was trying to scratch is I have a bunch of X10 home automation stuff, and I have a few X10 controllers where you can push buttons on the keypad to make things happen. And I've had those for a long time, and even as long as I've had them, they still don't quite always work. Well, one thing is I don't have very many of them, and the ones I do have don't always work, and so they're not terribly reliable. And I've had the idea for a long time of trying to come up with something that used more modern technology to allow me to control the system from a portable keypad. So I finally got around to doing that, and the first step was putting together the button box. So I looked through my junk box, and I had several of these keypads. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Screen. So I had several of these small keypads. This is the Amazon link to what those keypads look like. And they've been sitting around waiting for something to do with for quite a while. And part of what prompted me to do this is I was poking around on the web, and I found the link to the Arduino keypad tutorial. And it just happened that they not only did they talk about how to use a matrix keypad with an Arduino or an ESP8266, they were even using the same kind of keypad that I was contemplating using. So I started to poke around, and this is a nice little tutorial, which starts off by talking about the way a matrix keypad works, which is really quite simple. You just have a set of rows and columns that are the columns are wired vertically where switch 1 is connected to switch 4 to 7 and so on, and the rows connect the switches horizontally. And whenever you press a button, it just shorts the connection at the intersection of that row and that column. So, for example, if you press the intersection of row 3 and column 1, you get the 7. And then they go on to talk a little bit about how one could go through and implement that in software. So basically, without going through all the details here, the red lines say that you set all of those wires high, and you set the columns. The red indicates that it's set high in the columns, and the black rows indicate that they are set low. So when you close the switch at this intersection, it pulls that column or that row low, and you can see that there's something in that row, and then you go on and individually set the rows high, and you can figure out which row it's in, and you can read through the details if you really care. But the bottom line is the hardware is very simple, and with some software you can identify which key is pressed at the intersection of each row and column. But that's all pretty basic. The nice thing is that someone has put together an Arduino library that encapsulates all this stuff. And being an Arduino library, it also works for the ESP8266. And basically, you just you add the keypad library to your Arduino platform, and then you set up some basic information. you define a number of rows, a number of columns. You create this little keypad matrix that says what's going to happen when you press the intersection of each row and column. And then you tell it which pins on the Arduino are connected to each of the 4 rows and which ones are connected to each of the 4 columns. And then you instantiate a keypad object. And in your sketch, you can start to read keys from that keypad. So once you've connected up the hardware, that's all you need to do. So these little guys, let's see if I can get the picture here. Yeah. So so it basically just has an 8-pin connector that brings out the 4 rows and the 4 columns, and you connect those 8 pins to 8 I/O pins on your ESP8266, and you're good to go. So the hardware is very simple. In that box that I showed, all it is an ESP8266 that has at least 8 I/O pins available, and it's hooked up to one of these keypads where each of those connections is connected to one of the I/O pins. Okay, so that's that. But then I was going to just show a couple other things here related to that Arduino sketch. So here's my sketch where I did the things that were described in that tutorial. So I include keypad.h, tell it that I'm using 4 rows and 4 columns.
We're not seeing a sketch.
We're not seeing a sketch. Okay, let me stop sharing. My screen sharing is paused. Why is my screen sharing paused?
We're seeing the Amazon page.
Okay.
Now it's live.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to stop. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing because I thought I was sharing my whole screen, but I must have just been sharing the application. So thank you. Let's see if we're seeing a sketch now. Do you see my sketch now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, so this looks just like what was in that tutorial. The only real difference is that I'm using 4 rows and 4 columns, and this is the keypad that matches the labeling on the keypad that I'm using. The only real difference here is that when I specify the I/O pins, I'm specifying ESP8266 or actually Node MCU I/O pins, which happen to be the labels like D7 are it's not a 7, it's whatever the GPIO is for the D7 pin. But this basically what you're seeing on the screen here is all that's needed to interface to one of those keypads. And then down in my loop, the only thing I have is the only other piece of code is where I have get key down in the loop, and basically just says every time through my loop, I call keypad.getKey. If it's non-zero, then I publish an MQTT message that says one of those keys was pressed. So I still have some code to write, and I'm gonna try to make this a little bit smarter so I can execute like sequences of keys. But all I have it doing now is I just have something that's listening for any MQTT messages that come from this little switch box. And if I press the 1 key or the 2 key or the 3 key, then I get an MQTT message that tells me that that key was pressed.
Peter, could you provide a kind of bigger overview of the keypad or what you're trying to do? Do you set up a keypad so you can put in a code and then it does something?
Okay, yeah. So so the way I use my X10 controller now is I actually use it for 2 purposes. I use it to control things like lights. So like light number 2, I can control with a 2 on or a 2 off. But I also use it to make things happen in the house. So I have certain key commands. So like 12 off doesn't mean turn off device 12. It means we're leaving the house and you should turn off everything. And usually that works, but occasionally it doesn't work. And there's only a limited number of commands that I can use. So my goal is to come up with something a little more reliable using the Wi-Fi interface. So what I hope to do eventually is when I do something like 12.1.2a, which would be a 12 on, that will execute some command on my home automation system. So I'm going to put some more smarts into the controller that when it sees a sequence of keys like that, it sends a trigger to the home automation to do something. And by doing it this way, I can have a lot more than the half dozen or so commands that I have on the X10 controller. I could have up to 99 or even more than 99 different commands that I could invoke if I need that many. So yeah, so the idea is that I can have these little boxes scattered around on the bedside or wherever it's handy to have them, and have it control things, you know, customized commands for whatever I want to do in the house.
Okay, so by boxes, you mean the keypad controller that you showed us?
Correct. So yeah, so
And the way it's happening now is
I have a keypad. It's the X10 keypad, and I would press like the 12 button and then the off button when I wanted to turn off everything in the house.
okay. So what's the difference between the X10 keypad and the keypad that you showed us that you're trying to program now?
So two main differences. One is I anticipate this to be much more reliable because there's certain places in the house where the X10 either doesn't work at all or doesn't work reliably. And also this gives me more things I can control. So I'm limited to like 4 different things I can control with the X10 keypad. This would let me control many different things, like up to 10 or up to 99 or even up to 999, depending on how I write the code.
And the basis of your home automation is Home Assistant?
Correct. So it can listen for MQTT messages and take whatever action is desired based on those messages. So that's so the idea is right now it's just a very simple demo code that when I press 2 it sends 2, but I plan to make that a little smarter so that when I press 23A would mean send out something smarter. So
I noticed that the library doesn't have, I'm sorry, I noticed that in the code that you've scrolled through, I haven't seen any rising or falling edge detection or debounce. Does the library handle that all for you?
So yes, it does. So I'm not taking advantage of most of those features yet, but there are several things that this library does.
I have the keyboard that just scrolled by. Go ahead.
So one of the things you can do is you can do long presses by specifying a hold time on the button. You can specify a debounce time, and I haven't done this yet because my sketch is so simple. But you can register a listener, so you can have other things going on and have a callback if any key is pressed, if your architecture needs to do it that way.
So is this interrupt driven?
I don't think so. That's a good question because, like I said, I have not used this mechanism, and usually this type of application needs to be called periodically through the loop. Okay. And maybe they do that. I just haven't seen them asking for that, and I haven't actually tried to use it. Which reminds me, that was the other thing that I wanted to share about this sketch, is that a couple of the other interesting things here are that I am using the MQTT library, which is the pub sub client, which allows you to send MQTT messages, and I'm using if it's in here somewhere, I'm using the over-the-air updates. So when this is sitting on the next to the bed and not next to the computer, I can still send it software updates by using the over-the-air update mechanism. So what that means is in the loop, there's a couple things you have to do. Oh, and I also have a web server included so that I can, that's handy for debugging. But it means each time through the loop, you have to do certain things. You have to, every time through the loop, you have to see if there's any web server work to be done and do that. And then you have to see if there's any MQTT work to be done and do that. And then if there's any OTA work to be done, over the air update, you need to do that. And then I check and see if any keys are pressed. And I would assume that if you're using that keyboard callback library, that you'd have to have something similar to call their loop function. Or maybe they're using interrupts, but I haven't seen that mechanism described either way. So that'll probably be a good thing to look into. So
Does it have a key buffer? I noticed you're using get key. I mean, you could buffer them yourself.
so that's another thing, and I don't quite know what the status of this is. So he claims that in the current version of the library, it supports multi-key press, multiple key presses, and I think what that means is buffering up a sequence of keys.
Yeah.
Oh, I was guessing it meant chords. Like
yeah,
you could press
but
A
you
and
can't
L.
you can't with without diodes on your key switches, you can't really do chords.
And you don't have diodes, right?
So I think, and so here's the thing. He says he's written these additional functions, which are called get keys and find in list, and key list, where he talks. So it I presume that get keys returns a list of keys, but he never wrote the documentation for these keys. And somewhere it says the last time this was updated was in 2015. So I'm not holding my breath to get more documentation, but maybe by reading the code, it would be possible to tap into that and get it to return a list of keys. But that's another thing that I haven't actually tried to do yet.
It looks like a great library.
But yeah, I kind of, like I said, I've had this project on the back burner for a long time. And when I found this library, I was like, oh, well, that'll be easy. So
When you're using the old X10 things, are you using a wired X10 or wireless?
Wired.
Okay. So to go back to Gail's question, one key thing you have here, I assume the 8266s are battery powered, right?
So that was another thing that I part of the reason I'd been stalling off on this project is I had the idea that maybe someday I would like to make it totally battery powered, but I decided that especially when I want to support lots of key presses or lots of different keys, it's hard to get it to start up on a key press and do what's needed and then shut down. So I gave up on trying to make it battery powered and said I'll only put these in spots where I can have power, at least for now. That may be another thing to try to do down the road.
Do you have a picture of the X10 handy?
I don't have one super handy, but there are certainly
Google it and pick the right one to show.
Yep, there should be plenty of pictures of those around.
They're still for sale on Amazon.
Let's see.
Peter, if your
Powerhouse.
control box was completely wireless, then that would just be another remote to lose. And
Yeah, well, actually, I'm actually not finding any X10 images or any X10 keyboard images. Maybe I'll try looking on eBay. Yeah, yes. To Andrew's point, most of my interest in this is for keypads that
Jim's got one.
Okay.
Yeah, I had
Let's see,
exactly that model.
Yeah. I have to go back to my full screen.
This one,
here.
Jim
probably
is-
unlike yours, Bob,
Yeah, it's
There's an
hot
RCA
rodded.
jack on the back.
Yeah.
And I wrote 6502 code originally to remotely control this. There's an opto isolator in it someplace.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. I have to get back to gallery view. Pull that. Show that again, Jim. That's exactly what I have.
Yeah.
And
Speaking of the faux wood grain, there you go.
so yep. So I use, like I said, I have some of them just control lights directly, and then the computer can also hear it, so it can like I've actually been slowly migrating away from X10. So I have, if I send like a 2 off, the light that used to be device 2 is now an Insteon switch. So the Home Assistant thing will watch for that 2 off and translate it into an X10, or it'll watch for the X10 2 off command and translate that into an Insteon command, so that I can continue to control that light with 2 on and 2 off, but even though it's not an X10 switch anymore. All right, so that was really all I had to share.
Cool. Thanks.
Looking forward to seeing more progress. It's great. And just a reminder that we don't know everything. We learn as we go, and it's fun to share.
So I think Jim had another ESP8286 application to share.
Well, yeah, so this is sort of quite different than Peter's approach. It's not home automation. Let's see if I can get this to work. So Peter has done the appropriate thing and used the ESP8266 to actually operate what he has to operate. I was trying to drive a big string of NeoPixel LEDs in a funny shape. And the library I had for them was an Arduino library. And I looked at the library that was available for 8266, and I couldn't make it work quickly. So what my goal was, was to be able to control an Arduino remotely by Wi-Fi. And so what I ended up with, I just built on a piece of perf board something that would house one of these WeMOS D1 modules. And let's see if I can. What's underneath that? Is my screen shared?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's underneath that is a level shifter, because the 8266 is a 3-volt part, and the Arduino was necessarily 5 volts because that's what the LEDs ran on. So there's just 2 channels of level shifter under here, and a button to boot it. And these were pins that that eventually came up and were soldered into the 8266 module. So the goal was just to drive an Arduino with this thing. So the Arduino was just a kind of a standard Pro Micro, or I'm sorry, Pro Mini, not Pro Micro. And it's got the kind of usual 6-pin serial header. And I commandeered one of the pins, and you can see a blue air wire there, that the serial interface to these things doesn't use all 6 pins, obviously. Transmit, receive, ground, 5 volts. There's a reset button. And there was an unused pin. So I picked that up to drive my LEDs. So, and this is all just, this is the hardware part. Sort of the interesting part was software firmware. Oh, and this, just as part of whatever the application was, I wanted a simple connection, just a configurable thing. And this is using the poor man's switch approach. You know, the usual thing, you take an input line, enable the pull up, and then you ground that pin, you know, exactly, well, exactly as part of Pete's matrix was doing. But often people will mess around and try to get a wire all the way to ground. You don't need to go to ground. I just picked an adjacent IO pin, set it to digital output, and wrote a 0 to it. And that provides a perfectly fine ground, you know, just to pull a pull-up resistor down. So this was the guy. I only needed 3 wires out. Now, my LED matrix had was powered with 5 volts. It's got a several amp 5 volt supply. So I just stole the 5 volts from the LEDs and provided a connection to them. So essentially, I'm getting 5 volts from the LED strip and powering all this junk. And I'm taking the data and from this and going the other direction out this connector out to my LED strip. So this, let's see, maybe if I'm lucky, and I usually try to color code stuff. What seems to work pretty well is whiteout on these DuPont female connectors, and that gives you a white background that you can paint, you know, red or some color on. So this, I should be able to power, if I put the colors the right way, I should be able to power this up. But let me show you what I'm running. So there is is my screen shared on a GitHub page?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Good. So there's this thing called ESP Link, and it's an alternate firmware for ESP8266s, and it's got a bunch of stuff. And I had found this. You've got to reflash the 8266, and that was quite a challenge because it involves Python. Python is really cool, but it's not a friend of mine. The language is okay, but there's a version compatibility. Oh, well, you're running Python 2 or Python 3, and if you do this code won't work, and the environments were messy. Thankfully, Scott showed me virtual env, which was a way to set up some Python environments so that I could at least get this thing to work. But I've got, this is what that comes up with. And essentially, this gives me the communication between the ESP8266 and the Arduino is just serial. So I have the console. This is the console of the Arduino. And, you know, there's a bunch of other stuff.
I'm not seeing a console, if I'm supposed to be.
Thank you. Do you see something?
I see the
You'll
GitHub
see the
page.
GitHub page.
Still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you're sharing pause like Scott's did.
Well, what happens if I stop sharing and
Now we see your
start
desktop.
sharing and pick this?
There you go.
Now we see it got a console.
Oh, that's interesting. It was just sharing. I think somebody had said there's a way to share your whole screen or share an individual window. And I had
Yes.
been sharing one window. Yeah, okay. So this gives me the console of the Arduino. And if I can power this thing up. So what you can't see is that this thing is, the device is flashing, and I'm kind of hoping that the console is going to come up. And actually talk to it, which,
Live demos, am I right?
yeah, right.
Yeah, demo effect. So,
Curse of the live demo.
Well, which it isn't doing. So this part is cool when it works, right? So I've got the console, but this also allows me to upload code. Now, Pete's setup was doing it kind of the right way. He was allowing over-the-air updates, which go directly to the 8266. I'm just talking between the 8266 and the Arduino serial. So to get new code onto the Arduino, and let me, so there's a screen sharing. Is share the full screen? Somebody know how to?
yeah, it should be
When-
in the top left. You can pick the screen
It'll say desktop basically.
or desktop.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Should be on the top left.
Okay, so this is still the console thing.
We're seeing your whole desktop though, with the console on top.
Okay,
Now we see
okay,
the
so-
AVR.
there's a useful tool called AVR Dudis. AVR Dude is an open source programmer that will dump hex files or something out to various kinds of programmers, including the STK 500 that is emulated in an Arduino, and that's how its bootloader loads. So this is just a GUI interface to that. And this, if you have a fairly current version of AVR Dude, will allow you to talk not just over a serial port, but over a network port. Now, I don't know whether it does a netcat or what, but this is talking or should be talking to the Arduino over Wi-Fi. And what usually happens is that it doesn't like it. So I have given it, okay, so right now I've given it a hex file from, in fact, the same code that was on it. And this is about how fast it's able to program the thing. So what I have is something that, and here AVR Dude has said, it's done. And the processor is, so I'm a little surprised that I'm not talking to this thing. Can't demo that, I guess. Oh, it's talking now. So I have done kind of the long way around. Peter had something that would over the air load code directly to his 8266. I've had to use this ESP link stuff that gives me serial contact with the Arduino. And by using AVR Dudis, this lets me load whatever code it is that I want onto the Arduino, and I can get a console if I choose. The whole driver for this was I was doing something big and I needed it to be across the room, and I didn't want to run a long wire across the room to try to talk to the Arduino that was running the LEDs. So, here, I'll just make some Wi-Fi that lets me do it. So ESP link is kind of cool. It's just.
So that reset button is actually a hardware reset on the Arduino then?
Yeah, so one of the wires from the ESP8266 to this serial connection to the Arduino is the reset button. And so that does a hardware reset to it. So it's kind of useful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, just another different way to use an 8266 to talk to something that's trying to control the project of the moment.
Cool.
Cool.
Any other questions for Jim?
No, but he makes working around those complicated libraries look easy.
The hard part was Python. And then there's, of course,
Oh, there you go.
I think all too often we try and do too much in one chip or one system. For example, Raspberry Pi is not a, well, Raspbian, default Raspbian isn't a real-time operating system. So there's limits to what you can control. So using an Raspberry Pi with an Arduino, or using a ESP8266 for over the air, but using an Arduino for, controlling something that's time critical, like the LEDs, that makes perfect sense to me. I don't want to sound like, I actually like those sort of hybrid solutions.
Yeah, I was thinking about Jim's application, and I don't know whether the 8266 has enough power to do what CPU horsepower to do what you needed.
oh yeah, and there
hard
are
to do.
libraries. There are
Yeah.
libraries for NeoPixels that run just fine on 8266s.
I wasn't sure if it was fast enough, and also it's not 5 volts, so that would be another reason for
Yeah.
using the Arduino if you need to talk to something that's 5 volts.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, that wouldn't have worked. I would have needed level shifters to drive the NeoPixels, but I had to do level shifters anyway. So.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Very cool.
That's what I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing. And I think I'll take this opportunity to thank everyone for watching. And please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, support us on Patreon, subscribe, please, and like the videos and share everything on all the social medias. Thank you so much for watching. And
actually, before we log off, I was wondering if I could share something that I'm working on real quick.
Go for it.
One of the times that I was on prior, I talked about building a Dalek from Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've got here is this right here is where the eye stalk, or where the one eye kind of comes out like that. And this fits on this bad boy. And this is made from this is a fiberglass dome. Started out as a mound of monster clay and a dome screed that had all of the lines and everything in it to build. I'm kind of starting from the top down, because the main base is going to be that of an electric wheelchair. I just wanted to share that with you folks real quick. It's a slow process because of weather, but
So the mold that you used, did you make that yourself, or how did you come across that?
I actually found somebody with the mold that I borrowed. And I was able to, and they were local. They built a Dalek themselves, a different type of Dalek than what I'm building, but still kind of the same idea. The eye stalk piece is actually only held on by a couple of M8 screws, and underneath is almost like a lazy Susan, to where, electronically, which I know nothing about. I've only seen it, but electronically the head can spin, and there's 2 lights at top that kind of blink with the talking. But hopefully within the next month or so, I'll start on the base.
Very cool. Yeah. And all those circular pieces, are you still making those, or how's that coming?
I've actually kind of been homebound because of illness and whatnot, but I have my mold here. I just need to get over to Reynolds. That's over on like not that far off of Mannheim, and get the right kind of mold making material. And luckily for me, Hobby Lobby carries the actual domes, so I don't have to worry about making those.
Cool.
And buying one dome or one globe gives me the 2 halves I'll need to make 2 of them.
Okay. What was the cure time on that big piece?
I let it cure for about 12 hours. I kind of let it cure overnight because I was working kind of late.
Mm-hmm.
So when I woke up, there was no issues or anything with demolding it.
Okay. And then did you paint it or
That was the gel coat.
Oh, okay.
I thought so. That finish looked fantastic. I was skeptical until you said the word gel coat, dude.
But see, that's not what my final color. I'm looking to hydro dip, like what they do with cars. I either want to hydro dip a carbon fiber look to it or urban camouflage, just to give it a different look than all the other ones that are out there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll look forward to seeing the progress on this then.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt. So
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
That's cool. Oh.
Yep.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, then please continue
I'll-
to watch and
I'll be picking brains for as far as the electronics go. I know nothing.
Well, we have a lot of expertise here with the electronics. I don't think any of us have made the Dalek, but it's fun to learn about that sort of thing anyway.
Like I can find the schematics for the voice box. I just have no idea how to make it.
Okay. Well, we'll keep
And everything runs off the batteries of a 15-volt battery from a wheelchair.
Nice. Do you have the wheelchair base already?
Not yet. I'm working on that
Hmm.
because those are not expensive, even if you're getting them off of Craigslist.
Yeah.
Because on the show, it takes 7 people to operate a Dalek, but a friend of mine makes them so only one person
Wow.
does the voice, does all the movement, and it's all done from inside the Dalek.
That's something.
Oh yeah.
Very
So
cool.
you're gonna be sitting in this wheelchair controlling it then, or is that?
Yes. I mean, I could
All right.
set it up to where it's remote control, but I prefer to sit in it.
All right. You're gonna have to show us that when you get that
Yeah.
going. That
Oh, yeah.
sounds cool.
There's a lot less to go wrong without the remote control. So yeah, that's a good way to start.
Very cool.
Right.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I'll be looking forward to seeing that. So very cool. Well, this was fun. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back next.
Alrighty.